Thank you very much. This is Breakout Session 2. Our next speaker is Tom Monk, Director of Product Management, Cloud Solutions, Navisite. And he will be talking about something which I'm absolutely convinced will be dear to your heart, how to save money. So, Tom, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, sorry. We're going to be going through some top trends, strategies for cost-saving initiatives in the cloud. So I'll kick off with intros, as is the custom, and then we'll move on to a bit of future of the cloud, some trends, and then moving on to some strategies and tips and those kind of things to consider before moving into Q&A. So yeah, I'm Tom Monk. I'm Director for Product Management for Cloud Solutions at Navisite. That means I own our cloud strategy, and by extension, I'm the product owner for our cloud service offerings. It's great to be able to come to events like these and share what we're seeing in the industry, and also to see what our peers, partners, and colleagues are doing. It's my first in-person event since the pandemic, so I'm sure you've heard that a couple of times today already. I'm really excited to be here. It's great to get back in front of people, but probably a little bit rusty, so hopefully that makes for an interesting combination. So yeah, this quote here is from Gartner, really encapsulates what we're seeing out in the industry. 85% of organisations will be cloud first by 2025, and there's no business strategy without a cloud strategy. Cloud's been transformational to so many industries. To stay relevant and competitive, organisations need a solid cloud strategy, and never have those two things, business and cloud strategy, been so closely linked. So a little look to the future. So obviously the last 2 years have been transformational. COVID's had a massive impact. We saw organisations making those quick fixes in the cloud, quick jumps to the cloud to solve tactical challenges, tactical issues. But that initial move has paved the way for longer term transformational moves and larger scale adoption of the cloud. The cloud has been demystified for a lot of organisations. So now they're taking bigger steps. We're starting to see more and more cloud first strategies emerging in the industry. But organisations are probably going to have to look at what they did in 2020 and maybe before, and probably reevaluate what they've done. So what does this mean for 2022? I'm going to go through a couple of trends that we're seeing. So we're going to see an acceleration of cloud native projects. I'm sure you're all doing that yourselves. Calling back to that Gartner quote, as I said, strategy and cloud strategy, business strategy have never been closer linked. There's an imperative, a kind of assumption for so many organisations putting their business case forward that organisations will be using the cloud themselves. Things like SaaS providers, ISVs, to stay relevant, shipping products and features need to be in the cloud, need to be running in an agile way using DevOps, and you can see that in business cases. They're assuming that they're going to be working in that way. That initial move, though, has highlighted there's some drawbacks with that hybrid architecture. Dependencies on-prem, integrations back to on-prem will slow organisations down, so they'll continue to drive adoption of the cloud. And organisations are looking to make benefits from being in the cloud, so they're going to insist on it for their workloads, for their projects, for their services. Things like performance, flexibility that's only available to you on that scale in the cloud, businesses are going to be driving towards that. But because of all of these higher value features that organisations are going to want to attend when they're moving that business case for cloud native, they're going to have to take a longer view of their return on investment. They can't just be comparing your cloud bill to your on-prem bill. You've got to factor in higher value outcomes for these higher value services. And then just to sum up with another Gartner quote, new workloads deployed in a cloud native environment will be pervasive, not just popular. Anything non-cloud will be considered legacy. Analytics will also go cloud first. We've got another Gartner quote for you. There's not one on every slide, but we're getting there. As more and more environments move to the cloud, more and more data will move to the cloud. That goes without saying. But organisations are going to want to explore that data with analytics. And they're not going to want to bring data back on-prem. They're going to want to move to other hyperscalers. They're going to want to adopt analytics in the cloud. And the cloud service providers, the hyperscalers, and the market is responding to that. And you're seeing floods and floods of tools and services coming into the market. The cloud providers are pushing those as well to make it easier for customers to keep their data in the cloud. And these data services are democratizing data. They're very easy to use, very easy to adopt. We're going to see, analytics used to be only in the hands of the data scientists and the very skilled analytics engineers, but the hyperscalers are making it really easy for you to adopt analytics. Things like RPA, AI, ML used to be, very complicated things to get your head around. It's becoming much, much easier. And hyperscalers just have that framework for big data. They've got the scale that doesn't exist on-prem. Storing unstructured data, far easier in the cloud. Things like exabyte scale storage is in the cloud is a checkbox, whereas on-prem it's something that's much more challenging. We all know that you need specialist skills to operate in the cloud, and those skills are in high demand, and it's hard to retain those individuals. But organisations are going to have to scale their workforce in line with their workloads, and they're going to need to think about how they do that scaling. Organisations will continue to adopt service-based models within their organisation, bringing together experts from around the business to deliver business outcomes, not technology-focused outcomes. These individuals are going to be, these teams are going to be domain specialists in their organisation focused on those business outcomes. And organisations are going to have to continue to upskill to retain their staff. And again, optimisation, we hear about that all the time. I won't be the first person to say it today, and I won't be the last. Optimisation will continue to take centre stage. The freedom to build on the cloud is enormous, but it comes with many drawbacks, and controlling cost is one of those, which is why IDG cite it as a key concern for CIOs. And Gartner has predicted that through now and to 2024, every enterprise workload that moves to the cloud will need to be optimised for cost. We talked earlier about those tactical moves, those quick moves for COVID. A lot of those organisations and those moves would have been lift and shift without business drivers. So we'll see low return on investment, higher cost associated with those workloads, and many organisations will draw back from the cloud and maybe reassess and want to think about other ways of addressing those. Cost optimisation is going to be ongoing for organisations. It's an ongoing process. It's not a one and done thing, but it's not just about stopping spend and controlling spend. It's also about predicting spend, understanding spend, and attributing value. And of course, organisations will bring FinOps expertise into organisations either through partners or directly themselves. And there's plenty of tools out there on the market to support that. So we're going to talk about a few challenges that we see organisations going through that result in spiralling costs, and then a few strategies for addressing those. So the first challenge is a lack of plan or strategy. We've talked about what COVID has meant for organisations adopting the cloud, and then there's all sorts of kind of tactical business drivers that would move organisations to the cloud. And we see this all the time. And it might not necessarily have been an organisation moving without a plan or strategy. It might just be that their strategy wasn't as mature as they thought it was, and maybe they learned some things along the way. If you're moving without that plan or strategy, you're almost certainly going to take your technical debt with you into the cloud, and you're almost certainly going to gain some more when you get there. Unless you've got that plan, that strategy for addressing the cloud and removing that technical debt from your organisation, it's going to stick with you. Just moving to the cloud is not going to solve that problem. If you're moving without a strategy, you're probably not going to take advantage of cloud-native functionality. All of those key services, components, and value that comes from the cloud through adopting cloud-native, you're not going to get that. because you need to have a structured way to address that to get that benefit. And you probably will gain some short-term benefit. Whatever challenge that made you jump to the cloud will probably go away. But realistically, your long-term benefits are going to be much more difficult to come by. And you'll probably, without that strategy and that governance, you're going to end up with cloud silos. So finance is doing something over here, HR is doing something else, IT is doing something else altogether. And you'll end up with those non-standard implementations. So different platforms, different services, maybe even different hyperscalers, and different operating models. And that results in those non-standard implementations, which are very difficult to manage. You're going to end up with higher costs. Your cloud spend is going to be just higher than it needs to be. And it's also going to be much more challenging to operate in a cost-effective way. So the strategy for no strategy is to have a strategy. Defining that cloud strategy in advance is going to help organisations enormously. One of the things that we say to organisations all the time, and we'd always recommend, is setting up a cloud competence centre of excellence. We're a cloud-first organisation. We consult on the cloud. We have a cloud centre of excellence that we use internally, and we use to relay those lessons learned out to our customers. All of the hyperscalers have templates for cloud centre of excellence. I'd stress everyone, please go and have a look at it. And form one yourself if you don't have one. They're all, every hyperscaler have a slightly different take on what it is, but broadly they're all the same. That cloud centre of excellence is made up from delegates around your probably IT organisation, and then one or two from outside of the IT, out from the business, coming together to be to look inwards and form best practices around architectures, operational excellence. And then look outwardly and evangelise about the cloud internally, speak to business units, explain what the cloud is, how it's an enabler for them, and all the benefits that they can get. When you're setting up that centre of excellence, make sure that you set a charter out, set out your aims and your objectives, and they should be business objectives. You should be thinking about what your value that's going to bring to an organisation. It shouldn't be an IT outcome. When you're building out that strategy, take an objective view of your IT estate. Appraise all workloads, your entire environment objectively, and make sure that you're not burdened by what you're doing today. Think forward. And then when you're going through each of those workloads, go through the process of assessing them in a structured way, discovering data about those, analysing data, making recommendations, and then finally defining that TCO at the end, so you have a full understanding of the value that workload is going to get from moving into the cloud, and make sure you're able to quantify that against the business value. Another challenge that we see organisations moving on from and then having challenges with spiralling cloud costs is moving on from lift and shift. So many organisations move to the cloud, lift and shift, because it's the quickest, easiest, safest way to do so. And those could be for a variety of reasons. We talked about tactical moves, lift and shift, you need to do it quickly, makes perfect sense. But many organisations, as they lift and shift into the cloud, pay little regard for the process for doing so, management methods when you get there, or the cost that you're going to incur when you get there. You're going to fail to take advantage of the full capabilities of the cloud. Unless you move on from lift and shift, you're going to struggle to adopt PaaS, microservices, and serverless. A lot of reason organisations don't move on from lift and shift is because of a barrier. Is the expertise within the organisation. The result in all of these things is you're going to end up with a set of complicated workloads, with higher than expected costs, both in terms of your cloud spend and in terms of your operational costs, operational activities, the cost of those. Because you'll end up managing workloads like traditional workloads rather than managing them like cloud workloads and building in those efficiencies. And of course, you won't take advantage of the resilience and scalability that come from the cloud. And all of those, we know, embracing that resilience and scalability in the cloud can bring your costs down significantly. You'll also struggle with automation. It's just as challenging automating server-side activity in the cloud as it is on-premise. Unless you embrace and move on from lift and shift, you're going to have those same challenges. The strategy there is to refactor, modernize, and optimize. So when you're going through your design process, design with the cloud in mind. Don't be hung up about what you're doing on-premise, how you operate on-premise, how it's architected today. Kind of free yourself from those preconceptions and embrace the cloud fully. And don't build your own solutions. Look to lean on the cloud, adopt services to take that hard work away from you. Use your cloud center of excellence to regularly review your cloud infrastructure, your methods, your processes, your architectures, so that you can continue to drive innovation and optimize. Leverage a cost analysis tool. Make sure you're using a cost analysis tool. The hyperscalers give you some tools. The tools out on the market, the third-party tools, are much more powerful than they can bring real benefit to your organization. Assess your workforce. Do you have the right skills in your organization to move on from lift and shift, to embrace those new services and adopt those? And if you don't have those individuals, how are you going to bring those into an organization? And look beyond the public cloud bill. When you're attributing value to a workload and its migration to the cloud, don't just look at the cloud bill. Establish the labor involved in managing it, the time and effort you're going to save by removing undifferentiated heavy lifting from your operations and all the efficiencies you'll get there, and also quantify your market agility and all of those benefits you're going to get from being able to innovate and build quicker in the cloud. Final challenge, is complexity around cloud offerings. We know there are plenty of hyperscalers out there. They have hundreds of services, countless features, and then there's endless third-party products, and all of that is overwhelming. And knowing how to architect in the most cost-efficient and optimal way is a real challenge for organizations. And all of these things are changing frequently. And then when you add into pricing into the mix, every service has a couple of methods of pricing, a couple of price points, tiering available to them. Again, it gets really complicated. And these services new services are being introduced all the time. So what you're doing today might be cost effective and the right way to work, but in 6 months' time, it probably won't be. And then finally, you've got varied discounting strategies and billing strategies. So we've all heard about savings plans, reservations, PPAs, all of these kind of things. You can't just jump into one of those things and assume I'll turn that on, that's going to get me the best saving. It's not going to be the case. You need to really analyse, and probably a combination of all those things is right for your organisation. The strategy here is to measure, optimise and repeat. Consider bringing in FinOps expertise to your organisation. It's not just about stopping spend and controlling spend, it's about attributing spend. That's what we're talking about here. And providing ability to understand your bill, understand changes and what the impact that's going to be on your bill, report on your cloud spend, forecast, those kind of things. Your FinOps expert can act as a conduit between finance and IT, which everyone knows how challenging that relationship can be. But a FinOps expert is ideally placed to sit between there and help you build that governance framework that you need for working with finance. Continue to use your centre of excellence to evaluate new technologies and tools. Using the cloud is not a one-time activity. It's an ongoing process. You're going to have to continue to evolve, optimise to bring about savings and efficiencies. And look to lean on automation so you can free your teams up to do higher value services that bring you more value. So with that, we're going to jump to Q&A.
Perfect. Good man. Okay, thank you. Has anybody got a question? We'll just get a microphone to you just in a second. Somebody's hidden the microphones. It's a disaster. Oh, you were sitting on the microphones all along. Excellent, right. Put your hand up again, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's a fairly general question. I'm just sort of curious on your opinion of it. As I think has been made clear to everyone who wasn't already aware a couple of times through today, we're currently in the middle of a pretty rapid spike in cloud spend and cloud adoption. Infinite growth is impossible, so at some point that spike will level off, presumably. When we get, whenever that is, to the bright, shiny, cloud-native, cloud-first future, what role, what business case, if any, do you see for deploying new resources or projects in an on-prem environment as opposed to cloud, if any?
Yeah, so I think we obviously, we encounter all the time workloads that are more challenging to get to the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers are obviously trying to address that like crazy, and look to modernize and those kind of things. But those business drivers maybe aren't always there, and those cost efficiencies are not always going to be there. So I think there's always a potential for certain types of workloads to remain on premise, but in reality, what will happen is that those will become defunct at some point, and they will just be replaced rather than moved and all that kind of stuff. And organisations will look elsewhere. They may go to SaaS and those kind of things. I think obviously on-premise has a factor to play in this. I mean, we see edge computing is huge. Obviously IoT and all of those kind of things. I don't think it's going to disappear, but you'll see, I expect, the creep of the cloud into on-prem. So people organise things like outposts and those kind of things. Organisations will embrace those and being able to have a consistent operating model across their organisation.
Thank you.
Is cloud likely to get more expensive?
Well, the bills are going to go up as people adopt for sure. But hopefully you have a better understanding and quantify that, understand that spend. I'm sure there are examples out there, but the hyperscalers do seem to be working as they scale out and build efficiencies to bring unit pricing down all the time. I'm sure there are examples where it's crept up, but they're obviously not going to shout about how they increase their costs too much. But
yeah, but there is obviously. Forgive me for pursuing this. I'll come to you in a second. So there is an energy cost to actually running the cloud.
Yeah, sure.
Any form of energy is becoming much more expensive at the moment. Surely it's got to go up.
Yeah, it's a good point. Certainly AWS has got a huge push towards renewables, and they've got net zero targets. I think 2030, I think, is the majority of Amazon's net zero targets, and they're driving those earlier and earlier and bringing that in all the time. So I don't think we've seen any impact on the energy costs coming into the hyperscalers, but we'll fill our cars up every day. I'm sure it wouldn't be unheard. It wouldn't be a complete surprise if that maybe that trickled down, I suppose.
Okay, right, so.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for the presentation, Tom. A lot of truth in that. Kind of jibes with my experience as a solution architect and an AWS consultant. Really keen that you mentioned, we shouldn't manage cloud workloads as if they were traditional workloads. And just very specifically on that point, I wanted to kind of ask your opinion. Do you think fault-tolerant architecture can be a replacement for a disaster recovery approach, where we would normally move to a second data center? Or
I think we, as a service provider, we get a real mix of workloads coming to us. I'm not going to do the story of us as an organisation, but we've been brought together through a series of acquisitions, and some of those acquisitions were legacy service providers, and some of those are kind of born in the cloud service providers, and we're bringing those all together. So we inherit, a lot of kind of Oracle workloads, SQL Server, those kind of things, and getting those to a position where they're going to be fault tolerant. You can do a lot more in the cloud, but you're probably going to have to run a DR to some extent, and data replication is challenging and those kind of things. We do have plenty of organisations that are born in the cloud organisations that we support through our DevOps services and our SRE services, who are very close to that kind of fault tolerant, and we have a different model for addressing those. So I think you're always going to need an expert, either on the end of the phone, but I think certainly you can get pretty close, I think.
Okay. Question at the back there, please.
Hey, Tom. My question is around cost. So when we talk about cost, it's more about comparison between on-prem to cloud, right? But there's different aspect of having cost analysis between different cloud providers.
Yeah.
So in my role, I have previously worked with a cloud provider called Volta. I mean, it's cheap. It's okay. It's okay. Tried to move to AWS, Azure, right? The costs spiked suddenly because it was. I can understand that this is more resilient, more scalable, but still there is a quota. And even try to assess the cost between different cloud providers using their pricing tools like pricing calculators. It doesn't give you a realistic figures, right? It will never give you. So how do you actually manage to compare between different cloud providers, so, to manage that cost aspect?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because it's key and it's something we get a lot. I mean, a lot of the time, we as an organisation don't do too many kind of evaluations between cloud providers. We all know what the big three are, and that's typically because there's been a decision, a couple of steps before they embrace kind of consulting services to do that. There's probably a factor, private equity firm mandates a particular service provider or something like that. So that's often, so we don't get into that too much, but certainly comparison and cost modeling between services and those kind of things. I think, I saw something the other day online, there's like 17 ways to run a container in AWS, something along that line. So yeah, certainly we get into a position where we're kind of looking between, measuring solutions. And I think part of what we're trying to say here today is that cost is an aspect and it's an important aspect, but you don't want to just go on cost, right? You need to attribute value. So it's always about saying, well, this service is cheaper, but this service is more expensive, but it gives us this that we don't have there. So, and then it's attributing that value. And the only real way that you can do that is by saying, well, what does that give us in business terms? Because the value is not really to IT, probably. There's a little bit of value in terms of like people getting up in the middle of the night to fix something. But in reality, it's more about, what's the business outcome of having my environment more available? What does that mean for my organisation? So you have to factor all of those things in, and that's what we typically see.
Okay. Any more questions? No. Oh, just beg your pardon. You're on my blind side, that's the problem.
I have another question regarding costs. Hopefully it's not a silly one, but regarding like political issues such as like Brexit or stuff with war, and I guess also like silicon shortages, I guess stuff relating to physical resources to enable cloud services to run. How much of like a impact do you think that has at the moment and will in the future?
Challenges outside of cloud spend, you mean? I think certainly we've seen, I've been closely engaged with a customer who has a huge presence in Ukraine, and they were looking to go live with their new SaaS platform in February, and that's obviously not happened. They were delayed anyway, but something more significantly so. So I think that does. I think those kind of outside factors are always a thing, and I'm sure that's really hurting them from a cost perspective, not being able to launch. We know the challenges in the labour market. We kind of experience it from both sides because we're obviously looking to bring more skills into the organisation, and we have difficulty doing that. But our customers are coming to us saying, we can't get people anywhere. Do you have people? And I think to an extent, organisations are looking to de-risk that by coming to a service provider, because then that becomes our problem rather than their own. So yeah, I think it's certainly playing a factor for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for all those questions. And can I ask you to thank Tom one more time, please?
Just quickly, I am Tom. If you want to drop me a mail, Team Monk at Navisite, that's me. If you want to know a little bit more about Navisite, navisite.com is our website. Or if you're really keen, you can come upstairs and see us at the booth.
Okay. Right, breaking for lunch for 50 minutes, folks. Thanks very much.